The virtual conference live talks is the brainchild of Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman. It was initially developed as an emergency education channel to help professionals and general public manage their emotional and psychological response to the pandemic of 2020 by hosting the world's leading psychologists, researchers, and authors, and providing a platform for nano-live-workshops. It is now expanded into becoming a showcase for people to share their work and ideas in order to educate and inspire us to follow our own personal paths of value. Now please welcome your host, Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman.
Hello and welcome once again to the virtual conference live talks. Oh my goodness, I have my tissues at the ready. Never before on a live talks have I had my tissues ready like I have now. You'll never believe the guest that I have, Rikke Kjelgaard. Now, I have been headhunting Rikke for, in my mind this is, for about 3 years now. And since I first saw her in Seville in 2017, just to remind anybody that doesn't know me, there was a Manchester bombing, 22 young people were murdered. And a week later, then there was a terrorist attack in London. And then just about a week later than that, there was the Grenfell Tower fire in London. And me and my team were dealing with all of these three events, one after the other. And then after all that, I went to a conference in Seville in Spain where Rikke was, and I was totally mentally and physically exhausted. And I came across this most beautiful human being, physically, spiritually, emotionally, which was really affected me. And she made this video, which hopefully I'll show you a bit later, which was incredible and kind of reflected everything that I felt at the time and made me feel human again. And ever since then, I wanted to actually be personally introduced and meet her and have a conversation with her. And so I invited her along to the virtual conference live talks. And well, I'm very pleased that she agrees, and I'm sure you will be. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Rikke to come in from the green room and join us. Welcome, Rikke.
Thank you very much.
Wow.
I'm like totally imposter syndrome struck by the kind and very loving introduction that you made. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. So thank you, first of all, for coming in and spending time coming into the virtual conference. As you heard in the intro, the idea was to help as many people as possible. This one is a little bit more than that, because as I also mentioned, I have my own agenda here, which is to really to meet you and to get to know you, and so I'm totally open and honest and authentic about it. That I have also a personal agenda in this conversation. So, but for people that don't know who Rikke is, I always ask my guests to give us their latest update on who they are, and what they're about, because I find that it's the best way to get to know them, rather than me kind of read your webpage and then try to fumble through that. So, Rikke, tell us who you are.
Well, yes. Well, hello. So I was born in Denmark and currently living in Sweden, and came into psychology pretty late. So I'm a licensed psychologist. And before I did that, and so I am currently living in Sweden. I can almost see Denmark, and I work here in Scandinavia, and fortunate enough to also be traveling the world to do what I love the most, is to talk about acceptance and commitment therapy and authenticity and bravery and badassery. Are we allowed to swear?
Yeah, you can do anything you want on this show. Whatever makes you feel comfortable is
perfect.
When you were traveling around the world the first time, was that before you became a psychologist?
It was way before I became a psychologist. So I've been traveling, I've been working as a skiing guide, I've been working with singing and dancing and entertainment for tourists. I've been diving with sharks, living in the Maldives. I'm a certified rescue diver. So I've been doing a lot of traveling. And so I came kind of late into psychology, which for me was an advantage actually, because I've done my fair share of living before I was going into psychology and then giving advice and helping others. Today, I am fortunate enough to have my own company. If you look at my social media, I call myself Chief Rock and Roller. So I run my own business where I basically teach and supervise and implement acceptance and commitment therapy. I write a lot,
Wow.
and I give I do public speaking. So that's I live and breathe act, and I don't know. That was the professional introduction.
That's okay. Well, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty in a minute, but that's the formalities over with. Yeah, it's an amazing CV. You've got a full life, and I think if I wanted, and I've been to a psychologist. I was a psychologist for 3 years after I came out of the army, but for me to go to a psychologist, it's more than just somebody who's learned psychology at university. It needs to be somebody that knows about life, and has some experiences behind them. Because at the end of the day, and it's not just me, but my personal view is that, a therapist or a coach or a psychologist, whatever you want to call it, is not just the techniques, it's the relationship. That is, they talk about the dodo effect, which is like 80% of any therapy is the relationship. I actually kind of see how that really fits, because once you connect with another human being, and that human being has some wisdom and experience behind them, then, you can change your absolute, your whole life trajectory. Is there somebody in your life that was that kind of mentor or hero, or someone that kind of changed anything about your life?
I think there's been quite a few in various ways. So I've had kind of mentors who impacted me profoundly through like being brave and authentic. There's so many within the ACT community. There are like the people who are the founders of ACT has impacted me greatly, and so that's like and many of the great females within the ACBS have really Association for Contextual Behavioral Science has really impacted me. Also, I've had my fair share of hard experiences in my life, and that has impacted me as well. Like people who've been not people who has hurt me and has taught me a lot about strength. So I've had so many learning experiences, and I've been very fortunate to have strong parents who's taught me a lot about endurance and bravery. So asking me if there's somebody who's impacted me, there are so many, and it depends on the context. And I'm fortunate to be surrounded by really awesome people.
Yeah.
It's kind of a vague answer, isn't it?
Well, no, I mean, yeah. Look, if we were meeting for the first time, you don't spill everything in the first sentence. So we kind of peeling away the onion, as they say. For me, when I got introduced to the ACT community, it was very profound for me. My first introduction was to Stephen Hayes. I mean, I contacted him out the blue because my university professor had said, my supervisor actually had said, start learning about ACT. And I thought, well, don't know anything about ACT. And I contacted Professor Stephen Hayes at the time, thinking that, you know, it was a shot out the dark, and I could not believe the replies that I got. For me, if I was to boil everything down into one word, the whole community for me is generosity. Generosity like I've never experienced from so many people, and generosity of all sorts of different things. What would be for you one word that would kind of encompass everything that ACBS, ACT, the whole community there that you've mentioned, that you've surrounded yourself with?
Kindness and compassion. Those are two words though, but I think like for me, it felt like coming home to a greater family, and the way that this community just oozes and breathes and lives compassion is, I think that is the word that I would use, like compassion for each other, compassion for ourselves. So for me, it's a very compassionate, large family, and that's why it's so hard to just pin it down to one person. Stephen Hayes was the first one I met within ACT, and he has influenced me greatly. And there's just so many of them, so it's like one giant family of compassion and love, and that's pretty awesome. You included.
I agree. I think the awesomeness is that I haven't come across, and hopefully I will never come across, but I haven't, and all the hundreds of people that I've met that are associated, that are just so compassionate, loving, generous, nice, really attracts so many genuine people.
Yes, I agree. It's a very special community, and I think actually that's the antidote to a lot of suffering in this world, to have kindness and compassion for each other, for ourselves, for the suffering, for the situation that we're in right now. So I think there's like some profound learning in there to show compassion and to show kindness for whatever it is.
Yeah, you mentioned the situation we're in now, and you know, it's going into quite, you know, it's pretty long term now when it comes to this. You know, the beginning, nobody quite knew what was going on just before the springtime. Then there was lockdowns and all sorts of things. I don't know if in your country, though, I'm not sure there was lockdowns. Was there?
There has been lockdowns in Denmark, where I'm from, and Denmark, where I do lots of my work, has been total lockdown. Yeah.
Right. And so, but then it kind of been dragging on a little bit. Now we're heading into the winter, and you know, some people have lost their jobs by now, and some people have, you know, been ill, and some people have lost people, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of misery and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering going on in the world at the moment. So, you know, just bringing that home, you know, first of all, how is it affecting you personally?
I've actually taken quite a big hit, because my main job was to teach and do workshops and supervision. So I think in 1 week in March, like, you know, I was just canceled for the rest of the year, and so many cool conferences and travel opportunities. So I was financially and personally hit quite hard, and luckily enough, I quickly got online and kind of had to change the way that I run the company and change the things that I do. And so this also gave me an opportunity to finish a book that I've been writing on and to do other stuff. But it's been and it is very, very hard. It's hard to be away from my family and my friends who are in Denmark. We can't travel the way that we used to. It's hard to not go to conferences. It's hard to not be able to teach face to face. So it's been and it is a difficult period, and also a time to really reflect upon what is important and what is meaningful, and do more of that.
So I like to ask this question because, as professionals or as ACT practitioners or whatever, we're and as you mentioned, you're a teacher, you're writing books, and we're always kind of projecting this outward. But what interests me is, how do we use it for ourselves, especially when we're going through a hard time? And the fact that this is a universal hard time for everybody, so we can kind of talk about it freely, or more freely than if it's something really personal. But we're all going through this together. How do you use what you know to yourself? How do you use it on yourself? What do you do?
So one of the I've done quite a few. I've tried to like the basics to get the sleep that I need, to structure the day so that like the basic needs are met. I've spent a lot of time practicing acceptance. Like literally, there's not much I can do about the situation, and so. And one of the things that I've done, and I'm not sure whether it's avoidance or what it is, but I've actually spent a lot of time in solitude, which I'm not used to. We built a place in the garden with a hammock, and we built another place in the garden where we have like an open fire. So I've literally came off social media and have been in the garden around the fire, a little bit like isolating myself, and which is in one way a little bit of an avoidance mood, but also like a self-care move to spend some time alone, to spend some time with my family, because normally I work like all of the time, and I kind of still do. So the things that I've practiced is like getting a lot of sleep, spending time on myself, and crying, drinking wine. So, yeah.
That's an interesting
I'm not
thing.
encouraging people to drink wine, though. I can't say that, but
yeah,
a little wine does help,
especially in the wintertime. But the idea, and I think this is a beautiful idea, it's something that I learned through learning ACT, is that it's not necessarily the form, it's the relationship that you're having with what you're doing. So you said it might be, on one hand, a little bit of avoidance, but on the other hand, it's also a little bit of self-care, so it's not either only bad or only good. There's a mixture there, and it just depends on how you're possibly relating to it at the time. And I was talking to somebody else earlier about the idea of avoidance and distraction, and when does it become relaxation, or when does it become pleasure, and when does it become avoidance? How would you put that into kind of, how would you look at that?
Well, so it's hard sometimes to tell the difference between avoidance or something else. And one of the things that I do is that I if I'm not sure, I try not to do it, and then I'll see if it's avoidance or not. Like, so let's say, actually I don't drink, but this would be a good example. Like if you were drinking a lot of wine, is it avoidance or not? Try and not drink it, and then you would know if it's avoidance, because you'd feel very bad if you don't get your wine. So that's kind of a good way of telling whether it's avoidance or not. Stop what it is that you're doing, and if it gets really, really hard, it was probably an avoidance move. But I have deliberately, because that's how I would know that there's some kind of avoidance in there. But I have actually chosen to do the things that I do as an act of self-care. Like, I know I'm running away from the world right now, and I'm choosing to be with me right now. And so I think, and that is the cool thing about this, is that in every moment, we can choose kindness, we can choose compassion, and we can choose to do these little things as an act of self-care, as an act of compassion towards ourselves. I talk a lot about self-care, and some people think that, self-care is all about going to a spa or having a 7-course meal or traveling to the Maldives. And I think like just pouring your favorite cup of tea and drinking that can be an act of self-care. And so there's been a lot of that this year, way more than I normally do.
That's beautiful, and I think it lets us take that sigh of relief, because we're all of us, and I'm including myself, but everybody, I think, we're all hard on ourselves a lot of the times. It depends, and especially if you're a mother. I mean, I find mothers are really, really hard on themselves. But all parents, I suppose, and everybody in one way or another, and that kind of lets us take a little bit of a sigh of relief to say, you know what, you can do some self-care. It's okay to sit and have a glass of wine or a cup of tea or sit by the fire in the garden, and let it out a little bit. Cry if you need to, and it's something that a lot of us think that maybe we're not allowed to do, right? And that kind of gives us that permission to say, it's all right, really, it's okay. You've got this, but it's okay to show what you're actually really feeling.
And it's not only okay, it's pretty brave. So that's I just love that you're saying this, Dov, because one of the things that I try to teach people, regardless of me teaching like therapists or doing like therapy, is that it's okay to feel whatever it is that we're feeling. So right now that we're all hit by the pandemic, and that in and of itself is so hard. And if we have to fight that and our feelings around it, like it's a full-time job. So allowing ourselves to come into contact with whatever it is that we feel. I've struggled, like just during during this talk when you were introducing me, I was like, oh my God, who is he talking about? And so I struggle a lot with imposter syndrome, and I'm not sure I'm good enough. I'm not sure I know enough. I'm not sure, there's always not enough. And then during this pandemic, I looked at others and people are writing books and blogs and they're exercising and doing yoga and all that. And I'm in the garden drinking wine and crying. And, so there's this constant comparison to others, and we feel like we have to seize the moment and take this opportunity to do grand things. And sometimes it's okay to just feel like crap and not do grand things, and simply just sit down and cry and be sad about a really crappy situation. So there's nothing that you have to feel, or there's nothing that you have to do, and you have permission to feel whatever it is that you're feeling. And that, I think, is, if there was one message I would give the world, that would be the one.
Wow, and I think that's a wonderful message to give to people. I think it's people just sometimes just don't think of that. But it reminds me of when I first met you, and you showed that video, and I'd like to show our viewers that video now. Why it was so profound for me is, I think, every one of these messages I have felt or thought of one time, and the people watching will understand in a minute what I mean by that. But for me, it brings the message home that, being human is about not putting too much pressure on ourselves, because we're constantly doing that. And even hearing you now sit there and really in all your glory and everything that you do and everything that you are, and to come out with that, well, I also don't sometimes think that I'm good enough. It's like, seriously, you? And it just brings that whole message home. And I think it's just incredible. I just want to bring in a viewer, Fran, who's saying, wondering how you deal with people who openly state they think COVID is a hoax, and people who state that they're not abiding. Okay, so I want to add to that, and that is this. So thank you, Fran, for that question. And what I've found is that there's a lot of people, there's different ideas going on around. There's people who think this, and COVID is just, or coronavirus is just like the current thing, but there's lots of, you'll come up with lots of different subjects where there's people who think in one way and there's people who think in another way, and so on and so forth. But what I found recently is that people are losing friends and maybe even family members. And I'm not talking about to the disease, I'm talking about to opinions. And they stop talking to people and they stop loving them and they start hating people and they start, becoming secret police and becoming all sorts of things. Where basically nobody really knows the truth because we're still finding out all sorts of things. And that takes away from that compassion, doesn't it, for other people? It takes away from the love. And it brings that darkness and that hatred into the world, as if we don't have enough with a deadly virus. We're bringing that extra hatred into the world, which I think doesn't matter which side you're on, whether on this political side or that political side, or you believe this doctor or that doctor or this scientist, or you like your prime minister or you don't. At the end of the day, we've got to realize that one day that will blow over and we'll still be left with our communities and our friends and our families, and we might find out that we've ruined relationships maybe that shouldn't have been ruined. What do you think about that, Rikke?
Well, first of all, you're a wise man. I love what you were just saying, and I think that regarding the COVID, and I normally I tend to lean upon science. But I don't want to take a stance in this. But I listen to scientists when it comes to just about everything. When it comes to this thing about following guidelines and we all get divided, my advice would be to choose kind and compassion towards others and to see this in a broader perspective, regardless of what we believe. What I do affect others. And if this is not a hoax, and I'd say so it saddens me a bit to see that there are people like, oh, it doesn't affect me and I can do this and I can do that, because we're all in this together. And actually, I think that is one of the messages that I hope that we take from this pandemic, that we are in this together and we are fighting this together. And we need to take so we are not. I'm not responsible for the COVID hitting the world, but I am responsible for the way that I then respond now that it's happening. And so being kind and compassionate towards the struggle, towards others, and being responsible. I might now just be contributing to the division between the ones who follow the guidelines and the ones who don't. I follow the guidelines out of respect and kindness and compassion for others. If we find out this is a hoax, well, I was kind and compassionate during the hoax then.
Yeah, exactly. Rikke, give us a little bit of a background to this video you made. Why did you make it? What is it? What's the message there? And then I'm going to show a little bit to the viewers.
So it was made, the first version of this film was made back in 2012, actually, and it's inspired by Kelly Wilson, one of the founders of ACT, and Robin Walser, one of the great contributors to ACT. And so the first version was made long ago, and it was in a workshop where I was asking people to share their inner critic. And I didn't have I couldn't throw them away. So I took a picture of them and I made this into a film. And so I use it in workshops and in a lot of settings to show people that we are in this together, and to give people a sense, regardless of it's, again, in therapy or with training therapists, it's to give people a sense that you're not alone and that we're in this together. well, you'll see that. I don't know if you know this, Dov. I don't know if you came to the workshop in Seville, because this particular film that you're about to show, at the very end, there's a little boy there, a little blonde man with long hair. And so my son is in this movie. And so the version that you're about to show is particularly vulnerable for me. And so if you want to, I can just share to people here, because not many people know it, but so I went to this, when I was collecting these photographs for this version of the film, I went to do a talk somewhere in Sweden, and normally I don't get to bring my children to work, but actually at this, I was just speaking for a short period of time, and so I brought my children. And I had warned them and saying, so, you know, when mom is working, I get emotional, and it's okay. And so during my talk, I was crying and the audience was crying. And my son, my youngest son, he was 9 at the time. I started noticing how he was like really busy around the stage, and he came up and he poured water and he brought tissues, and he was just obviously in a total distress. And I was busy on stage, presenting. And so I was asking people all these questions about, like, how do you feel vulnerable? What hard messages are you giving yourself? And the whole room was sharing, and it was very emotional and very vulnerable. And Victor, my youngest son, he raised his hand, and I was like, taking away the microphone and going, oh, mom's working. Can we do this later? And he was like, well, I have something too. And he raised his hand, and he got a microphone then, and he said, Mom, when you're crying, I get so sad. And he, like, the spotlight was on him, and the room went quiet, and I stood there, and I was like, I felt naked, because I was at work, and here was my son, and he was clearly in distress, because I was in distress. And it was a beautiful moment too, because we could talk about all the things that he did because he didn't want me to feel bad. And I asked him, so Victor, you notice you're giving me tissues, and you're bringing water. What are you hoping will happen? And he said, I hope I want you to feel better. I don't want you to be sad. And I asked him, what would happen to you, Victor, if I didn't feel sad? Then I would feel better. So, like, it's just amazing how we react to the feelings of others, and how much responsibility we take in trying to adjust our own inner universe and the feelings of others. And so right after this, I was asking people, would you be willing to share your inner critic on a piece of paper for this movie that I'm making? And people got in line and stood there with all these really heavy statements. And I was like shaking and taking pictures. And Victor, again, he came down and he said, can I join this movie? And with like 1,000 people watching you, it's kind of hard to. So I was like, yeah, of course. And he went over we had like a table with papers and pens, and he went over and he wrote something, and then he stood by the photo wall and he said, so Mom, you can take my picture now.
Wow.
And I'm in a professional context making a movie that I'm supposed to show at a conference. And there is my son with a smile. You'll see his smile. He's only on for a second, but you'll see he has this kind of smile that is pretty fake. And on his note, it says, no one loves me. So 9 years old, no one loves me. And in that moment, my heart broke, and I might be the one who talks about acceptance all day. I teach people to acknowledge and be with their feelings. And everything in me was like, you cannot have that feeling. Like, you are not allowed, not on my watch. So it was, it's very vulnerable. I'm very ashamed because I'm not sure I wanted him to be in the film, and actually I took him out of the film. And then when I showed him the final version just before going to the conference, he was like, where's my picture? And so he wanted to be in there. And so the reason why I'm telling you this is I wanted to share, if you know, when you see a young boy at the very end, it's my son. And I wanted to share how early this starts, like at the age of 9, and he's probably had that for a long time. But if you ask your children, they will do this, like, you know yourself, the struggle that you have, you know yourself, the inner critic that you have, and it starts when we're so young. So the question is not, does your child, you know, criticize yourself? Does your partner, does your friend? I think it's safe to assume that everybody does that. Everybody has these difficult feelings. So the question is not if they have it. The question is, how can we create an environment where people will tell us about this? Because one of the things, like, apart from the shame that I feel of telling you that my own son has the experience of not being loved, I'm also proud that he was willingly sharing that with me. He was not afraid of my reaction to that. And so my wishes from this movie is, and for the work that you and me do, Dov, is to create an environment where people will tell us about these inner struggles, and where we can sit with them and tell them it's okay for you to have this experience. I can't take it away, but I can sit with you in that experience. And that is what I hope to, that's the message I hope to bring with this little film.
And I just want to say before we show it that I think your example there, even just telling the story of how you created that safe place, that safe space, that safe environment for him to be able to, at 9, to express himself in that way, I think is incredible. And I think it's that alone would be an amazing lesson for all of us to take away, just as a parent, because that's hard. And as a father of 4 children and a few grandchildren also, I know how hard that is. But for you to be able to say, to even give him the microphone, I mean, come on, just to allow him to take part and be part of that, that must be something that will stay with him for the rest of his life. I think it's amazing. So let's have a look and see what you were talking about. See you right after.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in reverse, and the tears come streaming down your face, when you lose something you can't replace, when you love someone but it goes to waste, could it be worse? Lights will guide you home, to let it go. But if you never try, you'll never know just what you were. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you.
Okay.
Oh,
So I know what I want to say, but I can't say it at the moment. So I think it's an extremely powerful video, first of all. For me, knowing some of these people in there and for them to be some of my biggest teachers and mentors.
yeah.
To know that they also have similar things.
Yeah. And
is I find incredible. It's heartwarming in a way because it makes me feel less alone.
yeah.
It really does. But yeah, it brings to light all these, how powerful thoughts can be and how much they can wreck us sometimes.
Yeah.
And just I have, as I said before we went on live, that Richard Burnett and Joe Oliver did. I did a similar workshop with them when it was the first time I did it, and I stuck it on me and walked around the room with it, and it was the most incredible experience. and just watching that film that you made, I think kind of crystallizes it, and I think it's there for to watch again and again, and I think it's extremely important, and the tears are coming down my eye. I think it's so important. If I could get anybody and everybody to watch that, no matter what age, just to understand that what you're thinking, yeah, we know. We know because we've all got it.
We've all got it. And you're not alone.
Absolutely not alone. It's, I think that's the bit, because unlike your 9-year-old son, it took me until I was well into my middle age to be able to open up and say that I have thoughts like that. I was never the kind of person, what you see now is not the kind of person that I always was. You would never see me crying, especially not on the internet, but you would never see me crying in public. You'd never see me own up to that I had anything like that. I had no flaws, and I knew I had, but I would never admit them to anybody. And I learned how to do this. I learned how important it is to talk with somebody like you and say, look, so that you can come back and say, hey, guy, Dov, I also have thoughts like that, or the other people, you're just human. And that's like, wow, I thought I was abnormal.
I'm so moved that you're sharing this with me and the people who are listening and watching, Dov. And I just want to, congratulate you for the bravery and authenticity that you're sharing right now. I'm shaking, and I'm just deeply grateful that you're sharing this. I know it's not easy for any of us to share this, and that there are so many cultural and there are so many. We get all these messages, and I'm just honored that you are sharing this. I understand the bravery it takes for you to do this. So thank you for that.
Thank you for allowing me to be able to do it, making me feel comfortable with you. I asked, and it's really important for the virtual conference to be experiential. And I didn't think that I knew, but I didn't intend for the video to be the experiential bit, although it's really turned out that way. But is there something that that you could do with us that are here, me, everyone, that can just be something that you can bring to us tonight? Oh, before that, I've got to ask you something. A really burning question, and I'll forget if we go into that because all these emotions. In your website, you claim that you talk about the fact, and you talk about it everywhere, that you're a feminist, okay? And I want to know what that means these days. What does it mean to you? What is a feminist? And I want to, in the most politically correct way, I want to say that you are such a feminine woman, okay? And I mean that proudly, okay? What is a feminist?
Well, to be honest, there are so many. I think there are many ways to talk about feminism, and there's correct ways to talk about it. For me, it is a celebration of women and womanliness, and basically what I proudly do is to teach women to give voice to what is important to them, to set boundaries, to be kindly and compassionately assertive, to teach women that a woman's voice matters as well. So the way that I approach feminism and the work that I do is not about beating up men or talking about the inequality that there might be. It's more about empowerment and teaching women, again, to give voice to what is important, to set clear boundaries, and to show kindness and compassion towards themselves and towards others. And so I have a lot of men as well in my workshop who encourage that cause, like that we're all equal and that we all have a voice. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's the way I approach it. I'm
Totally
not holding my bra.
No, yeah. Well, look, I started studying. One of the things I studied was sociology and so on. So there's all sorts of political ideas of feminism and so on.
Yeah.
But and what you've just mentioned, then I'd like to be an honorary feminist in your group. Also, I totally behind everything. It's wonderful. Okay, so just because we're going to be running out of time soon, and I want to. Ask if there's something that you could bring for us now, especially dealing with all this unknown, uncertainty, anxiety, worry that we're kind of all going through right now together.
One thing that I do a lot was an exercise that I actually learned from two great friends of mine, Jason Leoma and Jenna LeShun. I once did an exercise where we wrote down something that was really, really difficult, and we then sat with another person, and then we wrote it down on notes, and then we exchanged notes. And while that might be an exercise in an ACT workshop, I think that to take away the function of that. So what I would offer is that whenever you are facing something that is difficult, and you could write it down, you could imagine writing it down, but please do write it down and then just have a look at the note, and also sit with the note and just notice what happens inside of you as you sit with that. And then imagine that I could take your note and that you could take mine. So literally, Dov, like imagine now that I hand you my note. Often my note says that I'm stupid. I don't know enough. And I keep excusing myself. I look at others who are so academic and so smart and PhDs and all of that, and I have nothing of that. So I often tell myself that I'm stupid. So just imagine now that you have mine and I have yours. Whatever is on yours, I will sit with that. And so I'm just going to ask you, if you sat with my note, Dov, saying I'm stupid, how would you hold that? Like if you could hold that in a way that was full of compassion and kindness, how would you hold it? Like literally you had a little note. How would you hold it?
How would I hold it physically?
Physically, yeah.
Yeah, but I would hold it next to my heart. That's the way I would hold it. I would hold it here.
Yeah. So you take it and you place it on your heart. Some people will do that. Others will sit with it as if it's a little baby or a little kitten or something like that, or a little flower. So just notice the way that you're holding it. And then imagine that you give it back to me, and then you take your own note. How do you hold your own note? Like normal.
I don't even hold it. I'd stick it in my pocket. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't like
it. In your hand, you'd probably go something like this, right?
Yeah. I want it as far away as possible from me, my own note. Absolutely.
So just imagine like placing your own note on your heart and just noticing what that does to you. Like that part of you that you want to hide, that part of you that you don't like, those words that are so hard. Imagine what happens if you hold them close to your heart. And the thing is that this is difficult and it takes practice. Until you get it, you can borrow me. Like you can imagine that I will be your vacacious hope. I don't know if that even makes sense. You can imagine that I'm sitting with you and that I'm holding your note to my heart. So all you have to do is look at me and do what I do with your own stuff. What do you notice?
I notice there's somebody with me. That's what I notice. That's what I notice.
And so that's what I hope to bring to people, like that you are never alone. Like we might not we're in the same space right now, you and me, Dov, but actually we can choose to always be together in spirit. And we can take this moment with us, and you can borrow me whenever you want to, or somebody else, of course. And I can imagine you holding my note, and that nobody can take that from us. And we can choose in every moment to hold the stuff that is difficult close to our heart, even when that is hard.
Wow, that is beautiful. I didn't expect that. That's a gift. Thank you for that gift. I really thank you. I'm having difficulty talking the first time. Rikke Kjelgaard, I thank you so much for agreeing to be my guest, and I will hold this forever. And I look forward to the day that we can all meet in person again, and that will be a very exciting day to look forward to. In the meantime, Rikke Kjelgaard, thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for bringing me here. It's an honor to sit with you, Dov, and the people that you serve. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you.
Disclaimer, this show is not therapy, nor a replacement for therapy. Should you wish to inquire about therapy, counseling, life, or executive coaching, please contact Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman at factcpfa@gmail.com, factcpfa@gmail.com. Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman is a highly experienced psychotherapist, executive business coach, and author of the book, Mind Over Terror, 3 weeks, 2 cities, 1 mission. With over 10,000 hours of experience and academic degrees in government, law, clinical social work, and a postgraduate diploma in psychiatry with distinction, Dov has the background to help you. He's also available for public speaking and corporate training.